the author of some 25 books, 16 of which have made the New York Times bestseller list. And they're extraordinary. His books draw you in. I've read a multitude of them. I've always been a fan of his work. And his writing style is not only eloquent, but he's always gotten to the truth, but he does it in a way that is with great empathy. He's even transformed some of his own approach and his own style over the years, which I think is a beautiful thing. We'll talk about that in just a second. You've seen him on so many television shows. There, of course, Access Live. There is Billy Bush, and a lot of the network shows over the years as well. There's another one you might recognize, of course, Extra Television. And being a TV guy myself, fan of all of these. Inside Edition, of course, he's brought in as an expert oftentimes as well. Of course, this with the Kennedys, this is CNN, and so much more. Here's another great shot too of him on Inside Edition. As I mentioned, he's been on television for many years. This is Good Morning America, of course, and CBS This Morning as well, and the Wendy Williams Show. Take your pick. He's been on them all. And of course, some of the incredible works have included Jackie, Janet, and Lee, bestseller, of course. Let me show you some of the other ones. Of course, this one, Call Her Miss Ross, that goes back a ways. This being the most recent on Diana Ross, a beautifully written biography, as well as, of course, for the Beyonce fans out there, Beyonce becoming Beyonce. This is a really, I'm going to talk about this one too. It's a really beautiful look at her life, and you're often surprised when you read his material. You may have just the outer image of the celebrity, of the notable newsmaker, like we all have. And as somebody myself who's had an opportunity to have exposure to these folks through my television radio work, sometimes, you have an image, and then sometimes you learn about them a little bit deeper. And Randy has had that luxury and opportunity. The folks want to chat with him because, he takes great care. Madonna, of course, another. This one too, Jackie Ethel and Joan, another incredible one. And there is another version of that cover. The Kennedy heirs. I mean, whatever your pleasure is for reading, folks, there is a book there for you. Of course, After Camelot, New York Times bestseller. He's even written about the Hiltons, another legendary American family, of course. Elizabeth Taylor. Of course, this another fantastic one. Princess Grace and Prince Rainier, Once Upon a Time. That's a really, really moving one. Cher, of course. Yep. Again, take your pick. This is one of the most recent, Grace and Steele, Dorothy, Barbara, Laura, and the women of the Bush dynasty. Extraordinary. But going back even further, Michael Jackson, and also Marilyn Monroe, and one of my personal favorites, who I had an opportunity to chat with as well. And I'm sure, he loves her just as much as I do, and I know you do. We've talked about her a lot. The incomparable Carol Burnett, who in person is just everything you would hope she would be, warm and friendly and funny. Even Motown too, as well. Just a lot of incredible work here, just showing you some of it. And Frank Sinatra. I mean, he's touched upon some of the extraordinary, iconic figures of our time. And he writes with grand style, with great care, with elegance and grace. And again, his style has stayed true to form, but he really goes with a very discerning, empathetic approach. He takes great care in the writing. And I think that is absolutely beautiful. You don't always see that these days. And I think it's really extraordinary that he does. He's actually, many people know Los Angeles, right? Well, he's back home in Philadelphia. And I think he just finished a hoagie seconds ago before we go live here on the show. Let's check in with our great friend, Randy Taraborrelli. It's extraordinary to have him here. And let's welcome him together. Put your hands together, everybody. I know you're commenting left and right. We got a ton of comments here. We'll check those out during the show. Thanks for joining us, everybody, on the Jim Master Show Live. Randy, welcome to the show. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Jim. Wow, what an introduction. I mean, those pictures of me on television. Now I know how Lucille Ball felt.
Yeah.
Getting older and older and older and older.
The progression of you still look like $1 million. I tell you, it's because you enjoy what you do. And if you enjoy what you do and you have a passion for it, it shines through, and it does in all of your work. And I mentioned, in addition to all of these incredible books and more on the way, you've had exposure to and a lot of opportunity to work within television as well, miniseries, and you're working on some television projects which are quite exciting that we'll touch upon in just a second. But for you, growing up in the Philadelphia area, what were some of those early influences for you as a kid? Randy, as a kid, what inspired you to write, to have this appreciation and fascination for celebrity and for those who are out there, knocking them dead, grinding, doing what they have to do to reach people?
It's a good question, Jim. My mom was a writer, and my mom had the first byline in our family. Rosemary Taraborrelli was a food critic and a food columnist for the Delaware County Daily Times. And every week she had to deliver 2 to 3 columns, which were her favorite recipes, or a restaurant that she had visited that she was reviewing, or something that caught her fancy, in some way having to do with food. And I used to watch my mom and her dedication to meeting deadlines.
Yeah.
And that really inspired me when I was a kid. I think, and then my dad was self-employed. He was a painting contractor here in the Philadelphia area. And he inspired me and my brother, I think, to, also be self-employed and to not necessarily have, a boss, lording over us. And then my sister also was just somebody who was always very, focused and always very family oriented. And I think I learned a lot about the importance of family from my sister. And a lot of that is what you read in my books, because my books are usually about family.
Yeah.
And so I think, to answer your question, my family was my biggest influence. And then taking it, a little bit wider, I was entirely obsessed and fascinated by Diana Ross and the Supremes when I was a kid. I worked for the Supremes from the time I was about 10 years old until I was, I guess, 20.
Yes.
And
we have evidence of that. We did a little digging.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Oh, me and Mary Wilson. Gosh.
What a great relationship there. I mean, that you're talking, like you say, 10 years old, a Philly boy. Here you are. How did this all happen? This is absolutely fascinating. And I know that, thanks for letting us use that. That's near and dear to your heart, of course. Tell us about that relationship and how that all came to be.
Well, my mother actually took that picture of me and Mary at the Copacabana in New York when the Supremes were appearing there. I loved the Supremes for a lot of reasons, and a lot of it had, and especially Mary, because it wasn't easy for Mary after Diana left the group. And my primary time with the group was after Diana left the group, and I was able to watch her. I was able to sort of learn from her persistence and from her sort of dedication to making sure that the Supremes continued. And everything that she had to do, the obstacles that she had to work against in order for that to happen. because, Motown just was not supportive of the group after Diana Ross left the group. And I learned a lot from Mary about, not taking no for an answer, about just, challenging authority, because Mary was constantly challenging Berry Gordy, constantly challenging Motown. And I just think, I can't really express how sort of influenced I was as a kid by Motown and by the Supremes, by Berry, who I also knew from the time I was a young kid, and all of the Motown artists, the Temptations, and Stevie Wonder and Smokey. And I mean, these are all people that I knew when I was a kid. I mean, I met Michael Jackson when I was 14, and he was 12. And my parents were so supportive of this. I mean, there's no way that a 10-year-old kid is gonna be able to go to the Copacabana in New York.
No,
his mom takes him.
right, exactly.
I mean, I lived in Philadelphia. I wasn't going to these shows by myself. My dad would take me to the Latin Casino to see the Supremes or the Temptations or Smokey Robinson or Stevie Wonder or Frida Payne, or any of the acts. Yeah. And my dad used to have a saying, and he was really serious about it. He used to say, "If we can't sit on the stage, we're not going." In other words, my dad wanted to make sure that my elbow was on the stage.
Wow.
And I actually have photographs of me and my sister watching the Supremes with our elbows on the stage. My dad wanted to make sure that we were up front, and there was no time that J. Randy Taraborrelli would ever be sitting in the back of the theater.
Exactly right.
So I don't know how much he had to pay the maitre d' to get us there, but whatever it was definitely worth it.
That is really, really cool. You mentioned Michael Jackson. We've got some evidence of that. That is really, really cool, huh?
That's cool, right? I mean, I love that. That was taken at Michael's home. He was just getting ready to go to New York to film The Wiz, and I had done an interview with him at his house. He was really great. He was getting ready to break big at this particular moment in his life. He had a lot of apprehension about possibly having to leave the brothers and what was it going to mean for him. He hadn't even recorded Off the Wall yet at this point. So this is right at the beginning. And God, look at us. We're skinny too. I have my T-shirt has the logo of the Dramatics on there, which was an ABC Dunhill group, formerly with Stax Records, five guys who are sort of in the tradition of the Temptations. Michael has a Jaws T-shirt on. I love that picture.
It's fantastic. It really, really is.
Yeah, that was taken by my friend John Wyman, who took a lot of photographs of me back in the day with those folks.
So you've had this exposure sort of early on, which is wonderful. When did the writing actually come in? When did you say, I want to sort of document some of this? I want to capture some of this and tell their stories. They fascinate me. I want to dig a little deeper and be able to tell and share these stories with the public at large.
Well, the original writing happened as part of my work with the fan club when I was a kid, because I had to produce a fan club newsletter every month. And in the newsletter, I would review their shows and I would review their records, and I would vent about things that were going on in their career. And I would have sort of, it was sort of like the original Facebook, in the sense that, I had a lot of friends and fans all over the world when I was a little kid. They would send in letters and I would answer them in the newsletter. So that was sort of the original foundation of my ability as a writer. I never took any writing courses ever. I never learned how to type. I just sort of typed, but I never learned how to. I never went to college, so everything that I've done has sort of been self-learned. And when I got to Los Angeles to work for the Supremes, that lasted for about 2 years. And then when that job was over, I really needed to do something to support myself in Los Angeles at about the age of 19 without a college education. And so what I did was I went to newspapers and magazines that whose editors I knew because of my work with the Supremes. And I said, guess what? I'm a writer now, right? They were like, oh, now you're a writer. So yeah, I think I'm a writer. I didn't really have any choice because I had to do something. And so that's how I became a professional writer. I became a professional writer by necessity. It was either going to be that, or I was going to, be out on the streets. And so I was a really terrible writer, but I had a lot of really good editors who taught me a lot about how to tell a story.
Yeah.
And basically my college education was on the job. And that's how I became a writer. That's basically the long and the short of it.
When you first started out, I know for you, really getting to the truth, getting to, the authenticity was very near and dear to you. And an incredible way to approach it, to want to get to the truth of the matter. But as time went on, some of your style and maybe your approach and the way you're looking at the work became very inspired based and empathetic. Tell us about some of the personal transformation that happened for you, Randy, along the way as the years went on with your writing, with your approach to these biographies and these stories.
Well, when I first started writing books, I had a very specific criteria for what was going to be in my book. And basically, if it was true, that was good enough for me. And I think that, and I was young, and I learned over the course of time and experience as a person that often the truth is not all there is to understanding a person. Context is everything, and empathy is everything, and understanding humanity is everything, and also applying your own experiences as a person is very important. And when I started out, I didn't have any experience as a person. I came right. I got right out of high school. I went to Los Angeles. I was working. It's so funny because I have, I have nephews and a niece who have had a very different experience with their lives, and they go out and they have fun, and they party, and they actually have lives.
Yeah.
And I never had that because I could not afford, when I was 19 years old, to party.
Yeah.
I could not afford to go to a restaurant. I couldn't afford to go to bars. Right. I just couldn't. I didn't have any money, so I did. So in not having any kind of life experience other than being in front of a typewriter, it wasn't the best way to start a career in which you are exploring other people's lives. It wasn't until I got older and I started having my own life experience that I began to better understand the human condition and the experiences of other people. And so now I really try to understand my subjects in a deeper and kind of a little bit obsessive way. It keeps me up at night a lot of times when I've written something and I'm wondering if it's fair. I know it's true, but is it hurtful? Is it going to hurt that person's relatives, that person's children? Yeah. Like, what do I have to do as an historian to tell the truth, but at the same time not be that guy? Like I just don't want to be that guy. Right. And now other people are fine with being that guy, and I have nothing. I have no like judgment about that. Many people who are in my position feel that they have an obligation to the truth. I think that my obligation is to the truth, but my obligation is also to the people whose lives I'm documenting, to be able to know that when that book is going to be in the library for, all time, probably, that it does that person a service, and it's respectful. And I mean, I think it's not a lot to ask for from a biography for it to be respectful. And and my books, they're thick. I mean, they're looking at 600 pages. And I've always said that I don't want somebody to ever read one of my books and get to the end and say, "Oh, thank God that's over."
That was pretty much Moby Dick.
I want people to want more.
Yes.
I want people to, and this when I hear this from people who read my books, it's the best compliment that they could ever pay.
Yeah.
Which is when they say, I didn't want the book to end.
Yes.
And I get that a lot. I get people saying, I loved those people and I didn't want the book to end.
Yeah.
And I love it that sometimes I get letters from people saying that they start reading very slowly toward the last few chapters, and they only read a page a night because they're trying to drag it out because they don't want it to end. And I think that's because they like those people. And the reason that they like those people is because my subjects are good people.
Right.
I would never write about somebody that I didn't respect, that I didn't have great affection for. And I think that and I think that they appreciate the fact that I'm not trashing anybody, and people are left with their dignity, and it makes you want to read about them. Right. And it makes you not want to, slam the book closed and say, wow, I'm sure glad that's over.
Exactly right. What I think is wonderful too is your approach. For you, how do you decide who to write about? Are these folks that you've always been enamored by, folks that you've always enjoyed or followed? How do you decide? Because you could write about everybody on the planet forever. How do you decide for yourself, Randy, who you want to write about, what stories you want to tell?
Well, one of the things that goes into that decision is, what book would I love to read? What book would fascinate me? And that's part of it. I like to write stories about people who interest me. And I have to, as I said, I have to have respect for the person. I have to admire the person because it's such a huge commitment. It's years out of my life.
Yes.
And if you go and if you're going to spend that kind of time with a person and with their family members and with their story, it has to be somebody that you really, I think, love.
Yeah.
And so I've had the great fortune of only writing about people that I really care about. I mean, it's been great for me. I also want to say though that it's not only my decision. I wish I could tell you that, everybody that I love, I can write about. That's not the way it works. I've got to pitch the idea to my publisher, and hopefully they're going to like it. Lots of times they don't. Lots of times they say, that's probably a great subject, but it's not going to be a bestseller for you. Their concern is not so much what does Randy love. Their concern is what is going to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can come up with a subject that Randy loves that will also sell, then we've got a book. Otherwise, I'd be writing about the Andrews sisters, right? Believe me, I would love to. I would. I mean, there are lots of people I would like to write about. I like to write about a lot of people that would not satisfy my publisher's need to sell books. So that's real important too.
Let's talk about some of the work. Again, I'm sure, and I know from comments that are coming in live, and we appreciate all the comments, our audience is very familiar with a lot of your work, but maybe we can touch upon some of them. This one here, of course, Jackie, Janet, and Lee. Tell us about your desire to want to tell this story.
Wow. I mean, that's really one of my favorite books. It's so rare when you're writing about somebody who has been written about 100 times or more, Jackie, to be able to find a place to land that has not been discovered. You think that place doesn't exist, but it did, and it was the story of her mother and her sister. And that book tells a story that's never been told before about women who I think are amazing. Janet Auchincloss had never been written about before, and the mom. And Lee Radziwill has always gotten short shrift, even from me in my previous Kennedy books.
Yeah.
So to be able to take those two women and tell Jackie's story through their eyes and tell their story through Jackie's was so good and so great. Every single second of writing that book was just such a joy. Jackie's half brother and Janet's only son, Jamie Auchincloss, was primary source for that book. I mean, when you've got the woman's only son telling you stories about his mom, you've got really sort of a treasure chest of information.
Yeah.
And he was so great, and he's still a good friend of mine. I just talked to him yesterday.
Did you really?
Yeah. And he's the only sort of remaining person from Camelot. Everybody else is gone except for Jackie's half brother.
Yeah.
And and he and Jackie had the same mom, Janet. So anyway, I loved it. It's on its way to becoming my most successful book. I think it might already be there at this point.
It's incredible.
And,
congratulations.
People really have loved that one.
When you write and you publish these books, do you, I would imagine as you're, doing the research and putting it all together, you learn a lot more, obviously, about the individual that's being focused on and the players, the others that are a part of their life, their family, their colleagues, their partners, their associates, friends, whatever it may be. There's probably, even like with Jacqueline Kennedy or Onassis, things that you learned, you saw her from a distance like everybody has, but then as the biographer, as the person capturing these incredible stories and sharing them, you get a different perspective, a deeper, richer perspective, and more than likely appreciation for that individual, knowing what they go through, the blood, sweat, and tears, the toil, the ups and downs. One may just see the glamour, the glitz, the celebrity of it all, but you get to actually go behind the veil, behind the curtain, and see sometimes the rawness of one's life. What is that like for you as well? And does it ever change, enhance, tweak your original image of the individual?
Well, that's a really good question, because I don't outline my books. And I don't exactly know what the story is going to be until the moment that it's in front of me. When I wrote The Hiltons, for instance, I had no idea what that book was going to be about. I didn't know anything about the Hiltons other than Paris Hilton. I didn't know anything, and the book is not even about Paris Hilton. The book is about Conrad Hilton, her great grandfather, and it's about Zsa Zsa Gabor, and it's about Elizabeth Taylor, and it's about the Hilton dynasty of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. It's not, and it's so. I didn't know anything about any of that when I started that book, because I don't outline my books. I don't want to know what's going to happen until the moment that it happens. Now, when I'm writing about Jackie, it's a little bit different because I had experience with Jackie. I knew her when she was at Doubleday. She's the reason why I started writing biographies. It was her idea for me to write my first book, which was a biography of Diana Ross. And so I have memories in history with Jackie that, I apply to everything that I do where she's concerned. And I happen to be writing a Jackie biography right now. It's my first cradle to grave Jackie biography. It's the first time that I'm writing the entire story, not just a part of it. I've done her mom and her sister. I also did the women who married into the Kennedy family, Jackie Ethel Joan. I did After Camelot, which was mostly about the Onassis years, and the Kennedy heirs was about her children. But I've never done just all Jackie all the way through from birth to death, and that's what I'm doing right now. And it's interesting for me because of having known her, I kind of have an idea of who she was and what she would appreciate, you know, and what would be something that would really make her angry. You know, like I kind of have an idea, and so I can tell that story through the prism of my own experience with her, which I didn't have with Grace Kelly, for instance. You know, I never met Grace Kelly. You know, so it's a little bit different writing about somebody that you have had some experience with.
I would imagine too. And what about a relationship with? If it's somebody that you are a friend of, is it difficult sometimes when you're writing about somebody that there is this relationship with, or does that enhance the situation for you as the writer?
It could be a little more complicated, you know. I had a relationship with Michael Jackson, for instance. We were friends from the time I was a little kid, and when it came time for me to write that book, you know, I had to sort of really, you know, find a way to write that book without ruining my relationship with him, which I really valued.
Yeah.
And you know, but Michael and I always had, throughout his lifetime and throughout the time I knew him, for 40 years of knowing Michael Jackson, we always had a very sort of interesting relationship, you know, because he didn't trust the media and I was the media.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing that always worked for me and Michael was that I always told him the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And he always told me the truth. And if I hurt his feelings, he let me know.
Right.
I remember, and I've told the story many times, that when he married Lisa Marie Presley back in the 1990s, I was on Good Morning America. And I was being interviewed by Charlie Gibson on Good Morning America. And just sort of an aside, sort of a little smart ass kind of moment that I thought, you know, was funny. I said, and if anybody's interested, you know, Michael and Lisa Marie are registered at Toys R Us, right? Oh, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then Michael called me up immediately after that aired, and he was really upset with me. And he said, you know, I don't appreciate you making fun of my marriage. Like, this is important to me. You know, why would you want to be one of those people? You know, lots of people are making fun of me. I didn't think you would ever be one of them. Oh man, that killed me. That killed me. I got to tell you. I mean, that just wrecked me. You know, I promised him I would never make fun of his relationship with Lisa Marie again, and I never did.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, to answer your question, there are those times, you know, when you, especially when you're on television, you know, because it's hard, man. When you're on TV, you're live. You know, you're trying. You don't have a chance to weigh every little thing that comes out of your mouth. You know, there's not your filter doesn't really exist on TV because you are under a lot of pressure. There's lights. You're live. They're counting down behind you.
Limited time to get it all in. Right.
They're doing this.
Exactly.
You know, they're counting down their fingers behind your head. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, you know, and so you don't always get a chance to sort of like say, "This is going to be fair. It's going to be nice. How do I feel about this?"
Yes.
Whatever comes out sometimes just comes out, you know. And when in the case of that moment, it wasn't my best moment.
There was another book, of course, you talked about Diana Ross, and there was the very first one that we were talking about in the introduction, Call Her Miss Ross. Tell us about this one and the reception to this one for folks who aren't familiar maybe with this one, which actually you really have to be a lucky person to actually have it in your collection because it isn't to be found anywhere basically, right now.
Nope, it's out of print. It's actually my second book about her. The first book that I wrote about Diana was the one I wrote for
It looks like he froze there, doesn't it, gang? His Wi-Fi there in Philly might be a little tricky. He'll kick his computer, and that'll bring it back. We're still here for you, Randy. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at some of the comments that are coming in while he's kicking his computer. I read lots of books. Bios are my favorites. I'm also a Michael Jackson fan. Would love to get the book. Perfect. He'll come back in. His Wi-Fi sort of went down there a little bit, but when you're live, anything happens. You guys know. Yes, he You said he froze. Maureen watching in Arizona. She goes, he froze. I was hoping it wasn't me. Well, in Arizona, you're not really freezing right about now. Didn't you tell me it was like 72 degrees and sunny there yesterday? Linda in Florida says, Randy, you really have a nice arrangement in your room you're in. Oh, you're looking at his you're looking at his setting there in Philadelphia. Love the picture behind you. You guys are funny. And let's see, good to see. I'm enjoying the show. That's Terry Ann, 58 Mapes watching. Thank you very much for watching as well. And again, Randy will scramble. He's doing some stuff on his end to come back in. You're very correct, Dwight. Randy was on every talk show from Joan Rivers' show to Geraldo Rivera over the years. Yes. And you can still see him, appearing on a lot of the shows as well. You're having internet problems in Canada, really? Ooh. Maureen says it was absolutely beautiful yesterday. Today it's cloudy and 64, but 64 is not bad because here where we are in the northeastern United States, in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area between New York and Boston on the southern New England coast, 29 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. Maureen, would you like to trade? Let's take a look at some more of the comments as Randy figures out what happened with his Wi-Fi. He just returned back east to where he's originally from, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. Merlin says hello to everybody. Good to see you as well. I want to also show you again, for those of you who joined us late, we left off with Call Her Miss Ross, and he's coming back in right now. But here is that other book we were talking about as well. Randy just wanted to reheat his coffee. We were just
I don't know what happened, dude.
Yeah, they were all commenting. They love biographies and they're going to run out and order the books right away. They're loving the conversation. They're learning so much, and they're really appreciating your candor and your openness. So yeah, when you're live, when all else fails, go to the viewers and chat with the viewers. The lovities in this case. Cool. So you were mentioning, yes, the previous book, and then you were starting to talk a little bit about Call Her Miss Ross as well. That's, I think, where we left off, Randy.
That was my first New York Times bestseller. People love that book. I'm not crazy about that book. I think it's a little bit too tough on her. That was during that period of time when I talked about earlier, when I was really young, and as I said, I just thought truth was all that mattered. But I learned with Call Her Miss Ross that there's a lot more matters than just whether something is true. It's how you present it.
Right.
And so I did another book about Diana, which is my third Diana Ross book, which is just called, I think it's just Diana Ross. And it's more in line with who I am today as a writer. But people, they prefer Call Her Miss Ross. People love it. They tell me all the time that it made them love her even more.
Yeah.
That after they finished that book, they loved her more than they loved her before they read it. The cover is amazing.
It is.
It's not in print. It's not been in print in like 30 years or something. And people always ask me, "Are you going to put it back out there?" And I don't know. I mean, I have to really think about it. It's of a time and place. Call Her Miss Ross. It's of the 1980s. it's sort of the bitchy 1980s. You know, it's a very dynasty period of time. You know, when women were slapping each other on TV and
big shoulder pads.
Yeah, and divas were out of control, and it's of a time and place that is not this time and place. And so I'm not sure that will. If you have a copy of that book, it is a rare thing to have. And you know what? Everywhere I go in the world, no kidding, wherever I go, people talk about Color Miss Ross.
They call her that one.
That's the one that people talk about.
Another one, of course, there's the other one as well.
That's the third one. Yeah,
that's the third one. Tell us a little bit about this one. How does this one differ in your approach?
Well, that one was written by an adult, and the other one was written by a kid. You know,
I like the way you. Yeah.
And the third book was written by a grown-up, and the third book is more how I feel about everything as a mature person. So that's why I love the third book, and I wish that people would read the third book, because in that book you really get a better picture of Diana Ross, in my opinion, because it's just more balanced and it's more fair and it's more who I am as a person. You know, I think that a real misconception about biography is that people think that a biography is just the facts of a person's life, when actually a biography is filtered through the guy who wrote it. It's filtered through my own sensibility and who I am as a person. And I think you understand a lot about me in reading my books, as much as you understand a lot about my subjects. I think you know me pretty clearly by reading my books. And so I think that third book about Diana says more about me than the others, and says more about her.
And I like what you're saying, because, some people have the approach where the motive is to look for gotcha, look for, more of the salacious, more of the, and sometimes even bypassing the beauty of the person's life story and contributions and struggles and things that they've done and continue to do. And the focus is just on the gotcha part of it. Let's talk about things that, we know people are just going to want to hear. How do you approach that? How do you look at that from, your perspective?
Well, to be honest with you, a part of it has to do with how am I going to feel on television telling this story? I've been on television for most of my life, and if you go to YouTube, you can see a lot of TV appearances by me that I am not proud of, and they live on in infamy, and they're there for the rest of eternity. And, a lot of times I'll get a story from somebody and it just will be like, okay, I'm going to have to tell this story on TV one day. How am I going to feel about that? How's that going to look? And so that might be a good reason for me to not write it, because I don't want to be the guy to then have to talk about it. I'll find a better story. There are so many stories. The wonderful thing about a person's life is that my book is not everything there is to know about that person. Right. My book is everything there is to know about that person that I decided that you should know.
Right.
Because I can't possibly tell you everything there is to know about Jackie Onassis. I wasn't with her every moment of her every waking day, every waking moment of her day. I can tell you the parts about her that I think are interesting. I can tell you the parts about her that I think matter. I can tell you the things about her that I think show who she was as a woman, that best sort of demonstrate her character. And I get to pick and choose. That's the cool thing about my work, is that I get to pick and choose. I get to say, I'm not feeling this particular anecdote.
Yeah.
I love this one a lot more.
Yeah.
That other anecdote doesn't really express much except maybe just controversy. I can still give you that information, but in a different way. So a lot of this has to just do with my own my own value system, really.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. Yeah, folks are commenting left and right who are very familiar with their work. Loving Dwight says he loves the Diana Ross books, all of them. You know, what's also cool is sometimes when some of this work becomes visual, and I know for you with After Camelot, you've had an opportunity to bring that to, was it the Reels network, I think? And they turned it into a mini series for the Reels channel, starring Katie Holmes as Jacqueline Kennedy or Onassis, Matthew Perry as Ted Kennedy. Tell us about that other aspect to this, where the book then is brought to life, which is quite exciting.
Well, we did Jackie Ethel Joan for NBC as a miniseries with Jill Hennesey playing Jackie Kennedy and Lauren Holly playing Ethel. It was great. And then we did After Camelot for Reels with, as you said, Katie Holmes and Matthew Perry as Jackie and Ted, which I loved. We did The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe for Lifetime with Susan Sarandon playing Marilyn's mom, which was unbelievable.
Extraordinary actress.
Unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah.
The cool thing for me, man, is that, those were great and I loved doing them, but they were written by other people. The shows were not written by me. They were adapted by other writers.
Right.
Now, today, I'm doing my own. I made a decision during the pandemic that if we were going to have a pandemic, I wasn't going to waste a good pandemic on just being lazy. If we're going to have a pandemic, I'm going to do something.
I'm going to dive in here. Yeah.
And I used it to learn how to write scripts. I kind of knew because I've been around, but to kind of, figure out the best way for me to do it. And also to convince the industry that I could do it, because believe me, man, I no matter that I've had 16 New York Times bestsellers, it doesn't make any difference. In fact, it works against you because people look at you as a biographer, not as a teleplay writer. And so I had to do a lot of convincing, and I'm still working on that. There are people who still won't let me do it, but I'm writing 2 shows right now. I'm writing Once Upon a Time, the Grace Kelly show. I already finished the pilot. I can't tell you for whom, but it's going to be it'll be airing next year. It's called Monaco. And I also right now I'm writing the pilot for the Hiltons for another studio, another network, and hopefully that'll air next year as well. And then I am also working on Jackie, Janet, and Lee. So my whole thing at this point is I want to tell my own stories, and I'm willing to take what I learned as a 10-year-old, at Mary Wilson's feet, a woman who would not accept no for an answer. And here I am today, not accepting no for an answer, because there are a lot of people who would just as soon I not write my own shows. A lot of people would like for me to not write my own shows. But I'm writing my own shows now, and that's just the way it is. And I'm loving it, and I love the work, and I love the teamwork and the commitment of all of the people who. It's amazing, man, to think about the people who become committed to your project.
Yes, right.
Like when we were doing After Camelot, there are so many people. There are hundreds of people who are invested in getting that thing on the air. People that you don't even know who are obsessed with getting that show right, getting it on the air. I have so much respect for the collaborative effort. And when I write my books, it's just me. Like nobody, like when I write my book, it's me and my editor, but mostly it's me sitting in a Starbucks, writing a book. And that's a lonely way to go. And I've been doing that for most of my life. When you're working in television, it's a team.
Yes.
And you have to put your ego aside. You don't get the final say. It's not just your vision. It's a collaborative vision. And you can't be that guy who sort of digs his heels in the ground and said, no, I want to do it my way. I love that. I love the fact that it's a team effort in TV, and I'm enjoying it. The 2 shows I'm writing right now, the 2 series I'm working on right now. I'm really loving it. I think it's really been a lot of fun.
When you are writing, I love asking this question of writers, colleagues, and others. How do you know for yourself where to begin and when to put the period on the very last word, on the very last sentence? Because there's so much editing and you could go on forever. And like you said, you can't put everything they've ever done in the book because then it does become Moby Dick. But how do you know where to begin and where to cap it off where you're comfortable, you feel you've told the story in the way that you've wanted to share it? How do you know for yourself how to begin and to cap it off, Randy?
Well, I don't begin at the beginning. I'm not real interested in people when they're kids. I think people are more interesting when they're adults and and they have lives. I'm not interested in children telling children's stories. However, everybody that I've ever written about at one time or another is a child. So I don't start my books at the beginning. I find a place in the middle that really interests me, and I start there. And then I work in both directions. So that's how. And since I don't outline my books, I have the freedom of just being able to jump in wherever I feel I want to jump in. Now, ending the book is a little bit of a different story. If it wasn't for the fact that deadlines exist, I'd still be writing my first book. The only reason I have ever finished a book is because I have no choice. Right? That's the only reason, honest to God. If it wasn't for the fact that I have no choice, I would just continue writing forever.
Yes.
In fact, when a book comes out, I'm often in a bookstore and I feel like I want to write in the margins what I didn't have time to add to this particular chapter.
Yeah.
The only way a book ever ends for me is my publisher says, today is the day.
Mm-hmm.
Put the end and just end it. Right.
Yeah.
So what I do is when I get close to my deadline, I jump ahead and I start writing the end of the book.
Yes.
So that the end of the book reflects exactly what I wanted to say. Then I put the end. Then I still maybe might have a month left. And I go back and I start filling it in. And then on that day that my publisher says it's done, I can send it in and I have sort of exactly what I want it to be, But I wish I could tell you that I end a book when I kind of feel fulfilled and satisfied.
Yeah.
But fulfillment and satisfaction is not really the goal at that point. The goal at that point is you have to meet your deadline. There are people who are depending on you to meet your deadline. This is what I think a lot of writers don't understand is that it's not about you. It's about them.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of people who have scheduled your book, editors, copy editors, fact checkers, people in production, people whose job it is to move your project along, who have slotted for the last 2 years that they're going to begin working on your book on this particular day for probably another year of their lives. And how dare you then decide, I think I'm just going to be late.
Yeah. Doesn't quite work that way, right?
It doesn't work that way. You have a responsibility and you have to, it's bigger than you. So I just try to keep that in mind.
You wrote about I mentioned in the introduction, one of my favorites, Carol Burnett. Tell us about that, the complete life and career of Carol Burnett. What was it like laughing till it hurts, writing that?
That's interesting. I was really young and I was not known at that time. I think that's like my third book, and I just wasn't known, and I was having a terrible time getting people to talk to me about Carol Burnett because she's so beloved, and people just they just didn't want to talk about her to me. And I was getting stories from sort of like the key grip at CBS and the person at the cafeteria that she didn't talk to, and the person who scrubbed the floors that didn't like her. And I was like, this is terrible because she's such a great person and she's so well loved. And I wrote her a letter and I said, this is not right. this book is going to come out whether or not you like it or not. That's just the way it works. And it's not about whether or not, how can I put this? When I sign a contract, I have to deliver a book, and it's going to come out. So it might as well, I told Carol, it might as well be what you want it to be, because it's coming out. Don't let this book come out and the key source is the guy at the cafeteria that you didn't talk to one day.
Right.
And she called me up and she said, wow, you make a good point. I really appreciate that. And we had a great conversation. And then she just opened up the floodgates and she allowed me access to everybody.
You know why
And
that
I
is?
need everybody for that book, man.
Trust. It's trust that
That was
you,
great.
by offering her that opportunity, you created a level of trust with this individual who's probably approached constantly for their story. And she felt comfortable and liked your approach, that she said, I'm going to tell you a few things. And that's a beautiful way to have approached it. Would you say you approach all of the material that way when you're speaking to these folks? Is that part of it? There is this understanding between the two?
Well, yeah, the understanding is, this is your narrative as much as it's mine.
Right.
This is your life. Like I told Madonna, whatever it is that you want in this book, I would like for you to have.
Mm-hmm.
And also along with that is what I want in the book. It's not just her book, but it's also not just mine.
Yeah.
It's really collaborative, and I just really, I just try to make sure that everybody is satisfied. Now, of course, it doesn't always happen. I mean, sometimes people are not satisfied, and you do the best you can. I think that if you do the best you can, and a person is still not satisfied, at least you can say you did the best you can, and that's about the best I can offer.
Does anybody ever say change or rewrite? Do you ever have anybody read a book and say, can you take that out or rewrite it or re-release it or tweak it or change it? Has that ever happened to you?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because for most of my sources, I allow them to read the transcript of the interview before it appears in the book. Not for all of them, but for the ones I think are going to be touchy.
Yeah.
And a lot of writers are like, oh, you can't do that. Or what are you doing? You're giving that. Look, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I don't want to be on TV with that person and have a cat fight with that person about, I didn't say this. And why did you say I said this when I didn't say this? It's never happened to me in my entire career. And the reason for that is because I make sure that they have a chance to go over their material. And if they feel uncomfortable about something, and then forget it. I'm not putting it in the book, because there are so many stories in the big city. Like Jackie Kennedy, Onassis, once told me, there are a lot of stories in the big city. Find your story and tell it, right? And that's what I try to do. And if my story is going to hurt your feelings, then I'll find another story that won't,
Right.
So yeah, to answer your question, I want to make sure that my sources, especially who have given their time and their energy to me, are not dissatisfied when something comes out. I have never had it in my entire career. I've never had a person say, I didn't say that.
That's fantastic, right? That is so rare in these industries. That's fantastic. When you wrote the Madonna book, what are some things that you learned about her that maybe even you were surprised by?
The funny thing about that book is that I started it and then I stopped, because I started it during the phase of her life when she was sort of like in this S&M phase, with erotica and Justify My Love, and she was doing the sex book, and she was being very provocative, and I had a feeling that she was going to regret most of it one day, and I didn't want my book to end there, at this regretful moment. So I put it aside and I decided to wait until she had more of a life, in the same way that I needed to experience life before I could really tell other people's stories. I wanted her to have a bigger life before I told hers. And that's what I did. And I put it aside. And then she got married and she found Kabbalah and she had children and
Yeah.
she became a whole different person. And then
Yeah.
that's when I picked it up again. And then that's when I really wrote that book, was when her story had an arc that I felt was a more positive spin on her life.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well, because if I had ended that book with, you know, with Justify My Love and Erotica and the sex book, it's not a fair place to go. I mean, it wasn't a fair ending to have.
Right.
The way that book ends now, that's just a phase in her life that led her to, you know, bigger things.
Right.
And to becoming a more spiritual person, to becoming a married woman, to becoming a mother, to, you know, the work that she did in charities. You know, I mean, it's amazing what she did after that period of time. And I'm so glad that I waited for her to do it.
Yes. Does that happen often for you? I mean, I mentioned your own personal transformation and we all, you know, transform, we all sort of tweak and have different perspectives as time and wisdom and experience comes on. But have you had that happen with many of the folks you've written previously about, where they've gone through this transformation? They look at life a little bit differently, maybe a little bit more empathetically, and you want to revisit with a new book. You want to revisit the updated version of their life because that fascinates you as well. You captured them in those early years when they were grinding and doing what they were doing, and now there's this new version of them, and you'd like to capture that as well.
Well, it definitely happened with Diana Ross, and that's why I did the third book. You know, because the first book was really of the 1980s. You know, and I think the first book ended maybe in 1990. And, you know, and then after that, she became a completely different person. She's not the same woman. You know, people say to me today, oh, she, you know, she's such a diva. She's so difficult. She's not anymore, any of those things. And I hope that none of us are, you know, the same today that we were back in the 1970s.
Right.
You know, I hope that we've all kind of grown, you know, a little bit, you know, and Michael Jackson too. I mean, I've done, I don't know, 2 or 3 different versions of that Michael Jackson book, and, you know, have added to it a greater perspective as he grew into having his children of his own. Like when I wrote that book came out, the original book came out in 1990. That was long before Michael had kids. You know, I mean, that before he was married, before Lisa Marie, before Debbie Rowe, before all of that. So I had to go back and rewrite that book a couple of times and bring it up to date and give people an opportunity to know who Michael really was past the point of the original edition. You know, so yeah, it does happen. You know, I'm lucky enough to have this kind of a long career.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Sometimes people only read the first edition.
Yes.
And, you know, and they don't understand that if the next edition is going to give you something else.
You're right.
And so they are like sort of wedded to the first edition, and then they'll clock me when they come up to me, you know, in person, and they say, you know, how come you said this?
Yeah.
I said, well, yeah, that was true in 1970, you know.
Right. But I have another book out.
Yeah. And there are like 3 more versions of that book that better express how that person grew. We all are growing. I hope that I have grown. I'm sure you have. I'm sure that my readers have. You know, we have to give each other a chance to grow and live our lives and not be sort of wedded to what we wrote, or who we were back in 1990 when that original edition came out.
Absolutely. You wrote this book too about Beyonce, becoming Beyonce. And I know one of the things that I think is really special about her is this understanding of her upbringing and the type of person that she is versus what the industry demands and wants and sort of can box people into. Tell us a little bit about that. You know, she's got a good heart, a good soul. She's got a fabulous moral compass. And sometimes show business says, get out there and just do that, you know, whatever it takes, just go do that. And for some people who are good-hearted, nice, you know, empathetic, that does come not so easily to do that and to master that. Um, Learning that about Beyonce, I think, is fascinating. Tell us a little bit about that and digging into that and the book as well.
Well, I love that book. You know, I loved every second of writing that book because she's an incredible person. I've interviewed her in the past. And you're right. She has such a moral compass and she's a good person, you know, and a lot of people read that book thinking that they were going to, there were people who were disappointed in that book because they wanted her to haul off and slap somebody. You know, I got a review from, I think, Cosmopolitan, and they were like, "Wow, you know, she doesn't ever do anything mean to anybody." Like they were like upset because she's not a mean person, you know. And I was frustrated by that book because I loved telling her story because I think that she is a good person. And I told a story of a really good, sort of morally centered person. And some reviewers were disappointed because they wanted it to call her Miss Ross too, you know, and they wanted her to, you know, have a really terrible relationship with her singing partners. And they just wanted her to be something that she's not. And so there was a little bit of disappointment from some quarters where that book is concerned, because I really told a really wonderful, lovely story of a great person.
Yeah.
And in my, you know, in my experience, when it comes to some of these pop stars, audiences want them to be a little bit more edgy than they maybe are. And it's really unfortunate, you know, that you can't just accept that somebody is a good person without being angry at me because I didn't write about a moment when she slapped the girls in Destiny's Child, which never happened. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, right.
Didn't happen. I don't know what to tell you. You know, believe me, if it had ever happened, I would have found out about it, and you know, maybe it would have been in the book. But I love that book, and I think it's a really good story. And you're right, she is somebody who, you know, against all odds, became something, and those odds being that the industry wants you to be something else, just as many of the readers wanted that book to be something else. She was faced with that same dilemma throughout her entire career of the industry wanting her to be something else. And she stuck to who she is. And she has maintained her integrity throughout the entire journey, which is so great and so wonderful. And I love telling that story.
You also, well received is Sinatra Behind the Legend. Tell us about this one, Randy.
Well, that's another version that's another example of me having written a book twice. I wrote that book in 1997, I think. And then like 20 years later, I decided, let me go back and take another look at that. And that version that you just put up is very different than the one that came out originally. So if you only have the original version, you need to buy that edition as well, because that edition right there is much more of a adult look at him. You know, it's man, I wrote a lot of these books when I was a kid, you know, and so it's been a great opportunity for me because I've had such a long career to be able to go back and have the opportunity to do it again. You don't often get that, you know, you don't get it in television, you don't get it in film. Like I know that probably Tom Cruise would like to go back and do a couple of the scenes in Top Gun in a different way. You know, no one's ever happy with their work. everybody I know who've ever interviewed, they would, like, Madonna would love to do Evita again today. She would do it in a completely different way.
Completely different way,
We
right?
would love the opportunity, but you don't have that opportunity in television or film. But luckily for me, I have the opportunity to go back and say, let me think about this in a little bit of a different way. And I can put out a whole other book on that person, and it can be a New York Times bestseller again, like Sinatra was.
Yes.
You know? And I think it's such a great and rare thing for me to do. I don't do it all the time. But when I have a chance to do it, it really matters to me.
Do you often hear from the family, from those closest as well to the person, the individual that you're covering? Like in this case, the Sinatra family themselves, in terms of their feedback and response to a book?
You know, my experience has been, I haven't had a lot of opposition to anything that I've done in probably the last 30 years. And I think it's because Diana Ross once said something, and it stuck with me. And she said this like back at the 1980s. She was getting ready to try to do the Josephine Baker story. And she said that if she can't have alignment, she's not going to do it. That was her quote. She used the word alignment. And I have stuck with that my entire career, you know, that if I can't have alignment, like if I'm working on something and I get a letter from somebody in the family saying, we're pissed off, we don't want you to do it. Guess what? I'm not going to do it. I am not going to do it because I don't need that in my life.
Right.
You know, like I don't want that. I don't want to attract that in my experience. I don't want somebody out there being pissed off at me because I'm doing something that they don't want me to do.
Right.
And it actually hasn't happened, you know? So, I mean, I think
lucky, which is good. Yeah.
But if it did ever happen, I think that, you know, I know that if it ever happened, I would back off. It has not happened. And I think it's because people know what they're getting out of me now. You know, I have a history. You could pick up any of my books and you kind of know what you're getting, you know, and you know, it's going to be fair and it's going to be okay.
Yes.
So I'm happy about that.
Cher is another one, a beloved figure as well that you wrote about. Tell us about this one covering Cher.
Well, that's another example of something I went back to again.
Yeah.
Because that was my third book. I did Diana, I did Motown, and then I did Cher. And the Cher book was, I was really inexperienced. And actually, the Cher book is the first real book that I ever wrote because the Diana book and the Motown book were photographs with lots of captions, and there was text, but they were coffee table books. They were coffee table photo books. My Diana book and my Motown book. The Cher book is the first real book that I ever wrote.
Yeah,
it was actually
a full
And I didn't know what I was doing, man. I mean, I just think that original edition of Cher is terrible, you know. So I was able to go back and do it again, and but again, you know, it's all really subjective because just as in Caller Miss Ross, Cher fans love that original edition.
So that's my question. Cher the fans love that book. They love the original Diana Ross book. But for you, what is it when you say it's terrible, or I needed to reapproach it? What were some of those things that were happening that for you define that for you, where you need to go back and take another look at it?
You know, you have a bad breakup in your life, and then you think about Cher's relationship with Greg Allman, and you read what you wrote back when you were a kid, and you're like, oh, come on. You know, that doesn't even make sense anymore. Not given what I've experienced in my life. Like as I said, you know, if you've been around long enough, you're going to have to start applying your own life skills and your own experiences to your work. because you're writing about other people's lives.
Right.
And we're all part of the human experience, you know. So to answer your question, what changes is me.
Yeah.
That's what changes. What changes is the way that I think about things.
Right.
And as you're not the same guy thinking the same way you were when you were in your 20s.
Sure.
You know, that I'm not either.
Right.
And sometimes I'll go back and read a passage from that original Cher book, and I'm like, oh man, that is that is so dopey. Like, that is the dopiest thing ever. And I don't mean that as in dope, you know, the popular. I mean, you know, but yet those books mean something to people, because I get letters from people saying that's the first book I ever read. You know, like, those books mean something to people.
Yes.
And they don't think it's dopey.
Right.
They love it, you know. And so I have to understand that and respect it, you know, that it's purely my own subjective vision.
Right.
It does. That's why people love Call Her Miss Ross, because that was the first time they ever read a book about her that was a real book.
Right.
And, you know, and they maybe, you know, that in some cases it's the first book they ever read, period. You know? I get that a lot from Michael Jackson. So many times I get letters from people saying that was the first book I ever read. And I loved it, you know. So I don't like to trash talk my own books. Right. You know, I'd rather just write another version that satisfies me. Right. And maybe if you read both, you'll get something out of it. But I totally get it that people like the original edition.
Marilyn Monroe, you touched upon. I mean, you've really touched upon some of the icons from a variety of different backgrounds and generations. Tell us about your desire to want to tell this story, The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe.
The funny story about Marilyn is that the original title of that book, the way I sold that book to my publisher was, it was called Marilyn Monroe, The White House Years. And that just title alone is so great. Then we started researching the book, and we realized that there were no White House years. There was like a brief affair with JFK, maybe something with Bobby, maybe not. But there were no White House years.
Years, right.
But suddenly I didn't have a book. And I didn't even tell my publisher this, because I knew if I told my publisher, they were going to freak out. What we did was I sent my researcher, my primary researcher, Kathy Griffin, and I figured out, what is the story that's never been told about Marilyn? Like, in all the books about Marilyn, and there are like hundreds of them, what has no one ever told? And we figured out that the story of her mother. And it was a story of her relationship with her mom, who was who had mental illness and was paranoid schizophrenic. And we decided, okay, that is probably a good story to tell. And we did that, and we told it really well. And we came up with another title that was even better, which is The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe. It's funny that when I pitched that idea to Lifetime, for a miniseries, they said, what's the book called? And I said, The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe. And the guy said, sold. I said, don't you want to know what it's about? He said, I don't even care what it's about.
That title.
That title, The Secret. Like, to think that Marilyn Monroe, the most written about woman in history, has a secret life, sold. You know,
they were seeing Nielsen ratings numbers.
Yeah, but the original title was The White House Years, and we learned that there were no White House years, so we had to change direction.
What did you learn about her in writing that book that maybe was something you didn't even know yourself?
I didn't know anything about Marilyn Monroe when I wrote that book. So I was, you know, coming in from ground zero. You know, here's the thing, you know, I have, like, you know, 4 or 5 passions, and I covered them years ago. So, you know, the people always think that, you know, I only write about things that I'm really, like, you know, that I've had like lifelong passions for. That's not the case. I mean, Diana Ross and Michael Jackson that was it. After that, it was all people that I was learning about along the way.
Right.
I didn't know anything about Marilyn Monroe, not a thing. So, you know, for me to then learn about her life and frame it with the story of her mom, which had never been done before, was a great experience. But I have to say that every book that I've written other than Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, which are subjects that I loved as a child, everything else has just been me learning the story as I'm writing it. And it unfolds for me in the same way that it unfolds for the reader. And because I don't outline my books, I never know what's coming next, you know? So there is a lot of surprise in the research and a lot of surprise in the writing for me.
I would imagine too that you're often solicited to write books, maybe from the fans, but also from the personality themselves. They like your other books, they like the treatment others have received, whatever it may be. And either the fans say, please write a book. We love your style. We love your books. Write one about the one we love, the one we, follow, or maybe even the individual themselves said, hey, would you like to write a book on me? Does that ever happen from the fans or from the personality themselves?
It happens all the time. It's the greatest compliment, to think that a celebrity, I'm not going to name them, it's not fair, but I've had a lot of celebrities come to me and say, I would love for you to, tell my story. And also the fans have, they want me to tell the stories of people that they love. And I would love to do all of that, but I have a contract, and with a publisher. And as I said, we have to really figure out what does Randy love that will also sell.
Yes.
And a lot of the fans' ideas are things I would love to write, that just wouldn't sell. Like I would love to write, people want me to write about the 70s Supremes. And I would love that. It would be such a great book for me. And every day would be a joy. And then it would come out and it might sell 100 copies. I don't know.
You'd love it. The family would love it, right?
Yeah, but it wouldn't sell, the
what is needed
that you need to sell to make the investment of the publisher worthwhile.
Is that ever a pressure for you? Is it ever, have you ever torn like, gee, I really have such a great, vibe about this. I really want to write this, but economically for the publisher, it's not going to be as viable. How do you struggle and deal with that?
It's not a struggle because I just, I put my business hat on and I just know that they're right, and you just have to have, you can't just be an artist. You can't just be a creative. You have, not if you're self-employed as I am. I've never had a job.
Yeah.
I've never had benefits. I've never had a paid vacation in my entire life. I've always worked for myself. And so, and if that's the case, then you can't just be, some guy who just wants to, write about anybody that you just feel fascinated by. You have to figure out what's going to work in the marketplace and listen to people who have a better understanding of that than you do.
Yeah.
There are people that I really want to write about that I keep going back to. Like Jackie, Janet, and Lee was something that I went back to a publisher about over like 15 years. What about Jackie, Janet, Lee? Nah, it's never going to work. Are you sure? Nah, forget it. And then I'll do something else, And I want to write about Oprah. I think that people think I already have written about Oprah. I get it all the time from people saying, "Oh, I love your book about Oprah."
You're like, wait, when did I write that?
People think, of course, he wrote about Oprah, and I'm sure that people will love that, but I haven't been able to get my publisher interested in Oprah. And I would love to write about Barbra Streisand. I get that all the time. People say to me all the time, "I loved your book about Barbra Streisand," right? Well, I have not written about Barbra Streisand, but they think that I must have.
That you must have.
They read a book about Barbra Streisand somewhere along the line, and it must have been written by me.
Yeah.
So I keep going back with my ideas, and hopefully one day I'll get to do those two books.
Dwight says Randy needs to know about the history of Dwight Yoakam, the famous tight jeans, Buck Owens, growing up in Kentucky, and the Bakersfield biscuits, etc. His next book should be The Life of Dwight Yoakam. That's an interesting one. And
I'm gonna give that some thought.
Betty White, of course, everybody mentioning Betty White, Sidney Poitier, of course, both of whom we just lost recently. I'm trying to think if I could recall books on the shelves about Sidney.
Great subject.
Yeah,
It's a great subject. It's right up my alley. It it really works for me. I mean, if I wasn't working on a book right now, that's something that I think I could tackle, and I think that my publisher would love, because that is a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. How about a memoir for you? I mean, all of the experiences, all the people, all the stories. Sometimes it's not always easy to have the light reflecting back on us. We're always shining the light on others and lifting and inspiring and empowering other people. But have you toyed with the idea of sort of just, capsulizing some of this adventure and journey that you've had, Randy?
I've written on Facebook quite a number of times. So some of my stories with celebrities, and people do tend to love them. I just think that I've had such kind of a random career. It's very anecdotal. I don't know what my story is, except here's something that happened with me and Tom Cruise, and here's something that happened with me and Madonna, and here's a good story about me and Michael Jackson. And I don't know that there's a way to string all that together to be an actual book, as opposed to just being sort of conversations over Starbucks coffee.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. Maybe one day I'll figure that out.
You covered Elizabeth too, Elizabeth Taylor. Tell us about, again, another icon.
That was so good. That was so much fun. And again, I focused on her relationship with her mom. I mean, I always try to find a place to land in my books that has to do with family, and is something that people really haven't thought about. And Elizabeth Taylor's mother lived until she was in her 90s. And so she was a part of Elizabeth Taylor's life all the way through to the marriage that Elizabeth had with Larry Fortensky, which was her last marriage. And I thought, wow, I mean, what a great story. So that book is really primarily about Elizabeth and her mom, Sarah. And I just think it's a really good story. And I'm wanting to do that on TV one day.
Yeah.
I think that anytime you can, as I said, anytime you can tell a story about somebody that is so well known, but it's a story that people don't know, that's really golden in line of work. And one day I hope to bring that to television.
Somebody, and we'll be right there in the front row. Like your dad said, no seats unless you're touching the stage. We'll be right there front and center with that. Grace Kelly too. I couldn't go without touching upon this. Once Upon a Time, Princess Grace and Prince Rainier, and the realization for her that although it was, wonderful and glamorous and all of that, marrying a prince, but there was some reservation or observation that maybe that wasn't necessarily the right, goodbye Hollywood, say goodbye to Hollywood. And now doing this, maybe that wasn't necessarily the ultimate choice. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the theme of that book, Once Upon a Time, is what happens when you think you're making the right decision and you've really given it thought. You're not impulsive as a person, and you make a choice, and then you come to find out that you have really screwed up your life and it was the wrong choice. And that's what happened with Grace. She married somebody that she didn't know, Prince Rainier. She ended up living in a palace in Monaco, a place that she had only been to once before in her life. And surrounded by people she didn't know, she had to leave her friends and family, and she was living with a man that she didn't know.
Yeah.
And she didn't know him, and so what happened? And so, what happened is that she could have gone in two different directions. She could have just said, my life is over, and she could have just been miserable. Yeah. Or she could have done what she did, which was she decided that she needed to recreate herself and become something else and devote herself to that. And she became really the greatest princess other than Princess Diana. I mean, really, we only know two princesses if you think about it, Princess Grace and Princess Diana, and the other ones are all footnotes in our American history. And so I love that story because it's a really human story and it really resonated with people. It was another New York Times bestseller. And I'm getting the opportunity now to tell that story on television. And
that's exciting.
I've adapted that book as a series, and I think that people will really enjoy that story because it's really a good one.
You mentioned Princess Diana. There's been a lot written about her, and there's been all kinds of, different documentaries and things of that nature, but not one yet by Randy, which makes the difference. Tell us about that. Is that something you've toyed with at all?
Oh, it so is, man. You know me well. I mean, my whole thing is I want to write about the royal family. I really do. I am just dying to write about the royal family. And the problem is that it's been done so many times that people are like, it's been done too many times.
Yeah, right.
But my whole thing is it's not been done by me.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, it's not done until it's done by me. Right. So I'm still pushing it. That's one of the stuff. I go back to that every couple of years. I go to my publisher and say, royal family, let me please. They keep coming back and saying, nah, what about this? What about that? One day, eventually I know it will happen. They'll say yes, and I'll get to do it, and I'm really looking forward to that. That's the way it works in this business. There are people who have tried to get movies off the ground for 25 years.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
And Tom Cruise I keep going back to Tom because, Tom has projects that he's been trying to get off the ground for decades. You're never in a position where you can just say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. You've got to get a studio. You've got to get producers, and you got to get people involved who are
investors, funding, all of it. Yeah.
Not just you know, so I mean, there are lots of things I want to do, but I can't just sit here by myself and write a book and, copy it all up and send it out, I gotta have other people become invested. And you're right. The royal family, that is a natural for me. And one day that's going to happen.
You mentioned Tom Cruise. Has there really anything been done about him that you can think of? And is that one that you would want to possibly tackle?
I think he's great. We have a relationship. I know him. I've known him for a long time, and it could happen because he's the kind of person that makes sense because there's a lot of mystery about Tom. There's also a lot of controversy. Not everybody likes Tom Cruise, which I think is good for my line of work. There's intrigue there. So I think he's a good idea.
What about the Barbara Edens, Elizabeth Montgomerys, some of the other beloved television stars?
I love those people. Like
Mary
if it was
Tyler
up to me,
Moore.
like if it was up to me, I'd be writing about Marlo Thomas right now.
Oh, Marlo, sure.
And I would call it That Girl. I mean, if it was up to me, I would do Barbara Eden. I would do Betty White. If it was up to me, I would do all those people. But
how about George Burns?
I would do. I would love it.
There he is.
There he is. I would love it. That is so awesome too.
I tell you, isn't it cool? My aunt collected dolls when he was 100. They came out, I guess, with a limited collection of the George Byrne doll when he was 100. So it got passed down to me, and sometimes we show it on the show and puts a smile on the audience's face. A couple of people actually wrote about that. They're like, oh, has George Burns ever been covered? I would imagine he has been, but interesting stories with him and his, rise, and how there was this understanding between George and Gracie that they really were dependent on each other for each other's rise, which may surprise some too.
I think it's great. I mean, I think that most of these iconic people have great stories to tell, and I wish I could tell them all. I mean, I would love to do George Burns. I just think that would be so great. And it's funny because I just bought a Bobby Vinton CD, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And it's a CD with Bobby Vinton and George Burns singing together. And if you ever you can check it out, it's I downloaded it on Amazon Music. Bobby Vinton and George Burns together. I mean, what are the chances?
Right.
And I love it, and I play it all the time. Look, I am a pop culture junkie.
Yeah.
I love all pop culture. I love Dean Martin. I love Sinatra.
Yeah.
I love Victoria Beckham.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the guy that has all of Victoria Beckham's records, all of her music. I don't think anybody on the planet owns all of Victoria Beckham's music. I'm that guy. So that I love pop music, pop culture, and if it was up to me, I would be writing about those folks. But as I told you, I it's not up to me all the time.
Right.
But I sure wish it was.
Tell us more again about some of the exciting things that you have coming up that people should definitely look out for. And again, congratulations on everything that has been happening thus far for you. I know you're very excited about a lot of different projects that are happening.
I'm super excited about the new Jackie book. It's coming out in 2023 to coincide with the 60th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. And it's really, I'm writing it right now. I was working on it right before we got together today, and I'll be working on it as soon as we finish. And it's something I think is really exciting because it's really fresh, and I'm trying to do something different with her. It's a little bit complicated because I've done this is my 5th Kennedy book. And I said this on Facebook. I found out through the course of this that I only know so many words and that I've used them all already. I keep going back to my books to see, well, how did I write this? And it's exactly the way I wrote it in the other book, which is exactly the way I keep repeating my prose, and I'm trying not to do that with this book. But like when you write the same thing over and over and over again, sometimes the same language creeps in, so I'm trying to be a little bit careful. But I'm pretty happy about that book. I think people are going to love it.
Also, this is of recent note too: Grace and Steele, Dorothy, Barbara, Laura, and the women of the Bush dynasty. What is it about this particular, these women in the Bush family that really, I know the focus big with Dorothy. Tell us about your interest in wanting to tell that story as well. And again, congratulations on that too.
That was a great project for me. I was so inspired by Dorothy Bush, who is the mother of George H.W. Bush, and she's somebody who'd never been written about before, like Janet Auchincloss, and she was kind of my muse for that book. She was somebody whose story I really wanted to tell, and then I had interviewed Barbara Bush many years ago, and I was so impressed with Barbara Bush that I wanted to work with her on her autobiography, and she was at that time writing it with somebody else. And President Bush said, let's just wait and see how that works out, George H.W. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll call you. Well, it worked out great. Turned out to be a great book. And then many years passed, and I had this opportunity to do this book. And I would love for people to read that book because those are amazing women. And I can't tell you how much I loved Grace and Steele, the women of the Bush dynasty. Laura Bush, incredible. Barbara Bush, incredible. Dorothy Bush, incredible, and all the other women of the dynasty really resonated with me. And I think people have loved that book. And I think it's coming out in paperback next month. And I'm hoping that people continue to enjoy it.
That's really exciting. Again, there's so much that you have your hands in, which I think is fascinating. Do you find no 2 days are different for you?
Well, because of the pandemic, every day is the same day.
Yeah, I was just about to say,
For the last 2 years, every day is the same day.
it
Like
basically is.
I
Yeah.
can't, like, I don't know if it's Monday or Tuesday. I don't know what time it is. I don't know what month it is. I don't know. It's like every day for the last 2 years, it's just felt like the exact same day.
What have you learned in these teachable moments? I keep saying, I hope that we rise from all of this kinder, more empathetic, less divisive, as opposed to everybody speaking. We listen to one another more, and that empathy really does rise and shine with this occasion. I think we've all learned a lot of different things about ourselves and about society and about how to treat people and how not to treat people. What, with your experiences, your vast experiences meeting all different kinds of personalities over the years, what are some of the things you've learned about Randy during all of this 2-year time?
I have learned that at my core, I'm still a hot-headed Italian. And it's easy for me to jump to impatience when it comes to this pandemic. And I have been in the last year trying to temper that. Because being a hot-headed Italian during the pandemic is exhausting. And I'm so tired.
There's not a lot of places to express it, and you're kind of like,
And so I'm just trying to be more patient, and I'm just trying to make sure that I see other points of view. And and you know what I'm trying to do with the pandemic is apply to the pandemic the same principles that I apply to my job as a biographer. And I'm just trying to be more patient. I'm just trying to be better. And I think that that's all we can do is just try to be better. And I think that if people who follow me on Facebook have seen all different sides of me over the last couple of years. And sometimes I've been pretty upset. But we've all been upset. And it's just part of the process, I think, of getting through this thing.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see who we are on the other side.
Yes.
You know, I can't wait to get to the other side, and I can't wait to see who we are on the other side.
Yes. Yeah. I agree 110%. I think there's a lot of eye-opening. I mean, would you ever write about any of this?
It's not really in my wheelhouse to do this kind of sort of, you know, history of a culture, but you never know. You know, you never know. I think what's interesting is if I ever write about somebody, a celebrity who is living during this time, then I will have the opportunity to address this time.
Yes.
You know, for instance, if I ever did Oprah or Barbara Streisand, I would love to know how they handled these 2 years. And in writing about that, then I will be writing about the pandemic. I think that might be as close as I'll get to it.
Yeah. Well, good luck. Hopefully, you know, Barbara and Oprah are right there on that radar, and those come to fruition. Those would be great reads. Amy's been commenting throughout, and she said Grace and Steel is a must read. She's a super fan of your work, and she's been commenting throughout. She's read just about everything you've ever written.
Thank you, Amy.
Which I think is beautiful. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Amy, for that. I really love it. And
what's fascinating too is I think as prolific a writer you are and as brilliant as you are, the actual writing itself, you're not necessarily a fan of, right? It's sort of arduous and labor intensive, you know, the actual having to do it.
You kind of know me pretty well, man. I hate writing. So it's the worst.
Now, right there, we're going to pause. Did you hear that, folks? Right now, they're like, oh, what? They're shocked by that.
It's the worst. But I mean, you know, it's like, I am not that guy. I wish I was that guy that goes to the beach with the notepad and the sun goes down and there I am, you know, writing on a notepad as the sun goes down. sort of waxing poetic about things. No, man, I'm surrounded by research material. I got 4 computers going. I've got books all over the place. I've got transcriptions. I've got interviews. I've got tapes. I've got video. I've got audio, and all this stuff that I have to then turn into a book. And it's hard, you know. And I feel there are days when I'm like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And then on those days, I don't.
Yeah.
You know, but for the most part, I have an incredible work ethic, and my whole thing is just get words on a page.
Yeah.
You know? And if they're not good, they're not good. Eventually, you can make them good, but you can't do anything unless you get something down on a page.
Right.
I don't have a problem with saying that, you know, I don't always enjoy my job, because I think most people don't always enjoy their job.
Exactly.
You know,
right.
I think if I'd love to talk to that person who every single day is a pleasure. You know, I don't think I've ever found that person. You know,
Not even lottery winners find every day perfect.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's
hard work, you know. I mean, but I love it. Don't get me wrong. You know, I love it, but it's not like every day is just not like this sort of joy ride into prose.
right. And all of a sudden, this inspiration, these light bulb moments are constantly.
No, that doesn't happen. You know, like when you have that light bulb moment once every maybe 2 weeks, it's great, you know, but the rest of the time you're just kind of just trying to figure it out.
We had a well-known singer on the show last fall, and she said that in terms of her inspiration, when she could be inspired waking up out of sleep, she had a dream and now she has to run to the piano, press record on the recorder, and she's got to capture it immediately as it's actually happening. For you, do you have that as well? Do you have times where you can be on a train, on a plane, you could be here, there, you could be lying in your bed, and all of a sudden there is that light bulb moment and you got to get right to that computer and capture that now before it sort of fades away?
It happens all the time. And it happens mostly it happens when I'm not anywhere near my computer, you know, where I'm like, oh my God, that's what's going on. Like I finally figure something out about a person, you know, that something has been bothering me about this person's life story. And all of a sudden it makes sense, you know, and I'll jot it down right away. I can't wait to get back to work. You know, it happens to me in the middle of the night. I'll be laying in bed, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's what's going on.
Right.
You know, like I become really obsessed with my subjects, especially if I'm working on something that I don't really understand yet. And really, you know, it's not really coming together in my mind enough for me to be able to express it to my readers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be laying in bed, and all of a sudden it'll hit me. Oh, that's what's going on.
That's what's happening.
And and then in that case, I will run to my computer and, you know, and jot down that thought. But that's part of the great and cool part of my job is that, you know, you never know when it's going to hit. Right.
Exactly. Are there certain times of the day that are good for you? Are you a night person? Are you
I'm a sitting at my desk at 4:00 in the morning person.
Yeah, right.
That's me. If I haven't started writing by 11, it's not happening.
Then it's not going to happen, right?
It's not going to happen. I mean, I know it's not going to happen if I haven't started writing by 11, but I need to be writing by 4, 5, 6 o'clock in order for it to really be, you know, in order for it to work. Really, if I haven't started writing by even 8 o'clock, it's not going to happen, you know, because my life is really busy with, you know, with business and with calls and with meetings. And I mean, like everybody else, you know, these days, I'm doing maybe 6 or 7 Zoom calls a day. Yeah. You know, and because of the time change now that I'm on the East Coast, I'm able to get done a whole lot before they even wake up. Right. And they come into the office by 9 o'clock, and that's noon my time. By noon my time, I have done a lot, and they're just coming into the office. Yeah. But from noon on, I'm in Zoom calls, and I'm doing meetings and production development, you know, different things, editorial. So I need to get my writing done early, or else it's just not going to happen.
Or it's not going to happen. Well, I tell you, it's been happening for a long time for you, my friend, and really extraordinary. And just thinking back to what would the Randy of today say to that 10-year-old? That what would you say to that kid right there now?
That is a question that no one has ever asked me before. I would tell that kid it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
You know, I would tell that kid, just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
It took a lot from my family, from my mom and dad to, let me move to Los Angeles at the age of 18.
Yeah.
Without a college education and with no money. I can't believe they allowed it, but they knew that I needed to go. However, I was really apprehensive about it. And when I look at that picture of me and Mary Wilson, I see a kid who's like, wow, I don't know that this is going to work out. Maybe I should. I had a job at Sears, and it was like a part-time job at Sears in a division called Overs and Shorts, which was basically their.
Is that by the Winnie the Pooh section, or?
It was. I know it's not shorts as in clothing.
Yeah.
It was over the budget or short of the budget.
Short of the budget, right?
So it was overs and shorts, and it was basically their inventory department.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of thought, if I stay here, I'm going to one day either own Sears,
mm-hmm.
or I'm going to be stuck in overs and shorts. And so
There's your book right there, the title. I was
overs
stuck,
and shorts,
possibly stuck in overs and shorts.
So I thank you for that question. It's something I haven't really thought a lot about, but I think I would tell that kid it's going to be all right. Just go for it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Terry Ann 54 says, thank you, Jim, for a great show with Randy. He was so open about his career and his books that he's written. He has an extraordinary gift. I would agree. I would agree. And one that keeps on giving. Good luck with everything. This was really an extraordinary conversation, and I truly, truly appreciate all the time. The audience watching live or who will watch this in the archives, I think, have a deeper understanding, appreciation of not only the folks you write about, but you, the person that is, taking pen to paper and why you do it. So when they read your material, they'll have a deeper understanding of the perspective of where it's coming from, and the early beginnings, and the tweaking, and the, your own personal transformation as well. And Juanita, watching in South Africa, says, this was a fascinating conversation. Thank you, Randy, for spending time with us. Good luck with all the upcoming projects. Kathleen Walker in New York City. Thank you, Randy, for being here with us. All these great comments coming in here. Yeah, I'd love to. I'm an interactive guy here, and really fantastic. Kudos to you for, the determination and the resilience, and it all starts with that family upbringing, and the parents, and just the tone that was set early on that carries through the essence of who you are, and this empathetic and understanding approach to your work, my friend. You are welcome back anytime. Keep me posted on new projects. I'm excited not only about the print, but working in television. I'm excited also about all the television aspect to what you're doing. Francis says, thanks, Randy. Mary in Florida says, great conversation. A lot of wonderful books to explore. Farzana says, do more of these. He is. Look for them on your shelf, and all the usual places. Randy, I'm blown away by all the amazing books you've written. Congratulations on your stunning success. Wow. And Farzana again says, thanks, Randy. Dwight says, great, fantastic interview, Randy. Cool stuff. So
that's great. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Jim. it's just been really great talking to you. And also it's just great reaching out to people like this. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
The pleasure was all mine. I hope the show met whatever expectations you had and you enjoyed the time with me as much as I have with you, Randy.
I have 100%. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for all the time. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and let's stay in touch. We'll have you back soon again, okay?
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Take care. Be well now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Amazing. You got a chance really to learn a little bit more about this incredible individual. He's off. He's got Zoom calls. He's got a lot of stuff to do. So we are excited that he spent this amount of time with us. And we could have gone even longer because there's so much material that he's noted for. But we tackled quite a bit. And if you didn't see earlier, we were talking a little bit about some of the television appearances as well. I'm sure you've seen him on Access Live and on other shows like Extra. You know, he's been on them all. Inside Edition as well. And here's another one. Look for his appearances if you haven't seen them. He's prolific on television. There's another one from Inside Edition over the many, many years. And of course, CBS This Morning, The Wendy Williams Show, Good Morning America, and so much more. And again, this one's out of print. You never know. Maybe it'll come back. This one's out of print. Call her, Miss Ross. We talked a lot about this. Different versions of the books over the years as well. Of course, you can get them all. The usual places, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Randy's website as well. And if you missed any of the conversation about any of these, you can enjoy watching. And these are just some that we're talking about as well. That turned into the miniseries on Reels. Others have. He's working on one, a television project with the Hiltons, which is exciting. This one was Elizabeth Taylor, of course, and Princess Grace. Cher, we talked about some really interesting conversation about Cher. This very recent, Grace and Steele, Dorothy, Barbara, Laura, and the women of the Bush dynasty. And of course, the versions of the Michael Jackson book as well, and his great friendship with Michael. Marilyn Monroe, he talked about. Carol Burnett, too. And this one, too, Motown. If you never read this one, you should check this one out. It really is fantastic. Sinatra. There he is. This picture, we showed it a couple of times. There he is at like a very young age when he met Mary Wilson from the Supremes. And she was instrumental in his life because she was the one that invited him to go west to LA because he was, he ran the Supremes fan club for years. And they loved him. And he thought that he was going to just have this career and collect retirement and have this career with the Supremes. But when they disbanded, then, he had to come up with some other work and other things. And that's when he immersed himself into the world of writing. There he is, of course, with Michael Jackson as well. Really fantastic. Great conversation. Again, we have conversations here. We don't call these interviews. These are conversations in our Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series. We love to bring all of you in. Maureen says, wow, just wow. The brilliant mind of an author is something I admire. What an incredible gift. And so glad to have gotten to know more about Randy's work. I agree as well. Maureen watching in Arizona, USA. Jane watching in Sweden. Thank you, Randy, for being here tonight. Thanks, Jim. Our pleasure. Merlin says, thanks, Randy. Stay safe. And she's watching up in Canada, our neighbors to the north. Joan says, thank you, Randy and Jim. This was a lovely afternoon. I love your books. And Juanita says in South Africa, wow, amazing and talented guest. Thanks, Jim. I don't read a lot of biographies, but I might just get myself one or more of Randy's. That is perfect. Good stuff, gang. Glad you guys enjoyed it. Dwight loved it as well. Great, fantastic interview. Thank you very much. You guys are truly the best. If this is your first time watching the Jim Masters Show live, Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series, thanks for joining us. As you guys know, this is an extension of my work professionally here in the States in television and radio. Love doing this show with all of you. And we also love when we have our host viewer chat shows, and check out some of the on location episodes we've done as well, taking you to some very special places, historic places and more. So it's a lot more than just interviews with notables. It's a very interactive scenario that we do here, and I absolutely love it. And I love having all of you here with us for the ride. It's really fantastic. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we would absolutely love that you do that. The channel, of course, is Jim Masters TV. Click the notification bell so you never miss any of the episodes. There's some 600 or so that you can go back and binge watch and thoroughly enjoy. And I love when the guests tell us they want to come back on the show. So many of them, you know, when we do shows that have guests on them, because we do some shows where it's just you and I and other surprise things we do. But with our guests, we end up becoming, if we weren't friends before they came on the show, we become friends after. And it turns out we end up knowing a lot of mutual friends because of being in the similar industries and working for me in the broadcast media industry. We end up knowing a lot of the same people. If you enjoyed this episode, give it a like. That's the thumbs up like on our YouTube channel, and leave a comment for us on the YouTube channel as well. We would thoroughly love that. A couple more comments and then we're going to head out. We've got Harp Twins joining us tomorrow, special time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Maureen says, Jim, you are the best at leading these conversations. We're really able to get to know the personal side of your guests, and that makes being in Lovety Hall the best part of my day. Thank you, Maureen. I really appreciate that. Beautifully said. And how do we print these out? I'm still trying to find out a way we can print these comments out. Kathleen in New York City. Great show. Thank you, Jim. My pleasure, Kathleen. And I hope you're doing well. And Joan says, it seems Randy has been on a lot of TV shows and he can add Mr. Jim Masters to the list. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Joan. And Gary watching in Iowa, USA says, stay warm. Yes, we've got our warm turtleneck on. The hot cup of cocoa that we started with, saluting all of you, kind, generous support of you, is now cold cocoa. So we're going to have to reheat this. That happens to me all the time with my coffee and my tea. I'm always, heating it up, and then the phone rings or there's work that calls, duty calls. And guess what happens? It ends up being iced coffee or iced tea. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that as well. You guys are the best. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Jim Masters Show Live. Again, check us out. Many more shows. We're kicking off our 2022 in style. Always a pleasure to have you here. Keep spreading the word about the Jim Masters Show Live Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show Series. We appreciate that. And as we always say, don't forget to smile. Don't forget to share the lovity. Don't forget to find your Zen place. Mine, of course, the ocean. We are along the ocean here in the northeastern United States, in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, between New York and Boston, along the beautiful historic southern New England coast. That's the mighty Atlantic Ocean you're looking at there. And the ocean is a Zen place for me. But of course, loving family and friends is always the top Zen place. And my work over the years in television, radio, stage, and film here in the United States and elsewhere continues to be very, very Zen and very special for me. Help us grow, share the lovity, tell everybody you know about our series right here on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV, which is a channel not just with interviews. It's a channel totally dedicated to entertaining, informing, educating, and inspiring. That's what we do here at the Jim Masters Show Live and our entire series. I love it. Good stuff. And Kathleen, thanks for joining us as well. We appreciate you being here watching from New York City. Thanks, gang. A wonderful show. Once again, we thank Randy for joining us here, award-winning journalist, New York Times best-selling celebrity biographer extraordinaire. A real pleasure having him on the show, and a pleasure having all of you with us here on the Jim Masters Show Live as well. We hate saying goodbye, so we don't say goodbye. We just say, see you later. We'll catch you on the next one. And you can find them all here on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. I think there's one more comment coming in here. And Mary says, have a spectacular evening. You as well. For those that are watching live, of course, we're live right now, but you can see all these episodes in the archives as well. All right, Jim Masters here, your host. Thanking you for your time this time. Till next time on the Jim Masters Show Live, Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series. You be well. Take care of one another. We'll see you again soon, right here. I'll be waiting for you on the Jim Masters Show Live. Take care and be well. And cheers.